Good evening, everyone. So we are going to cut another question today. So this question is called NMO. So, of course, like we have to do always, you have to first check the requirements. So, and they're asking us to calculate equity value of NN using the following business valuation methods. So they want us to do the dividend growth model, then net asset model. Then as well, calculate the after-tax cost of debt of NN. Then they want us to also calculate the weighted average cost of capital for NN, and then explain the concept of market efficiency and distinguish between strong form efficiency and semi-strong form efficiency. So these are the requirements that we have. So of course, what we are going to first do is to go back and see what information has been given to us in the scenario. Then we can see how we are going to actually go ahead doing this. So if we go to the question and then we look at the scenario, so they are saying that following financial statements has been given to us. So we have there the assets, we have non-current liabilities, non-current assets, current assets, we have inventory, we have trade receivables and cash. Then we have also been given equity and liabilities. So we have ordinary share capital, preferential capital, we have retained earnings. Then we have the total equity as 94. So we are working in millions, that's 94 million, which is financed by, we have non-current liabilities, which include long-term borrowings. We have current assets, current liabilities, we have trade payables, and we have other payables. So now, of course, they're saying that NN has just paid a dividend of 66 cents per share, and her cost of equity is 12%. Dividend of the company has grown in recent years by average of 3% per year. So they have given us the growth. Ordinary shares have a nominal value of 50 cents per share and an ex-div market value of 8.3 per share. So they're saying that the long-term borrowing of NN is consisting of 7% bonds, redeemable in 6 years' time at their nominal value of 100. And the ex-interest market price of the bonds is 103.5. So then the preference shares have a nominal value of 50 cents per share and pay an annual dividend of 8%. And the ex-div market value, preference shares, is 67 cents per share. Then they have given us the tax rate of 25% per year. So they want us to calculate equity value of NN using the dividend growth model. So the dividend growth model is one of the formulas that are given to us in the exam. So this is the formula that I'm referring to. So if we take it to our Excel, so we are doing NN core. So we are going to calculate the market value using dividend growth model. So what do you need? You need the dividend, you need the growth, you need RE, the cost of equity. So the dividend, they have said that a dividend of 66 cents has just been paid. So that is 0.66. Then they told us that growth has been 3% per year. Then the cost of equity, they have said, did they give us the cost of equity? So we don't have the cost of equity. So let's see what we can do to determine it. So we have the ordinary shares have a nominal value of 50 cents per share, ex-div market value of 8.3 per share. So let us see what we can use as cost of equity. Oh, we have cost of equity, 12%. Sorry, I was not saying it. So cost of equity is 12%. Therefore, we can determine the market value per share as it's going to be the dividend multiplied by 1 plus the growth divided by the cost of equity minus the growth, so which gives us 7.55 as the market value of equity. Now, we need to get the total value of the company. So we need to know how many shares we have. So how many shares do we have? They told us that the nominal value is 50 cents. So, which means that if we go to our information, which is provided to us, where we have ordinary share capital of 50 million, so just get 50 million divided by 50 cents. So which gives us 100 million shares. So after getting that we have 100 million shares, so the market value will be 7.55 multiplied by 100 million shares, which gives us 355 million. So that's using, so this is using the dividend growth model. So then they also told us to use the net asset value. So using net asset value, now net asset value uses the value of assets minus value of liabilities. So now they have told us you can see here that the assets are 143 million. So if you subtract liabilities, you get equity of 94 million. Now, ideally, that would have been the net asset value if at all we are using book values. But even when we are using net assets, we try to use market values where we can. So now we have total assets of 143 million. Then we have total liabilities of 49 million. Now here is where sometimes we actually go and also consider. Now remember, in the equity section, it would have been 94 million, no problem. But you see what we are going to assume, because these preference shares have fixed interest or fixed dividend. Okay, so normally sometimes they take them as debt. So ideally, you see that the preference shares have a nominal value of patients and paid dividend of 88%, and then the market share is 67 cents per share. Now for me, when I look at this, since they have not told us that they are redeemable or they are not redeemable, now there are two angles to take here. So with preference shares, this is how you treat them. If they are redeemable, treat them as debt. Then if they are irredeemable, you may treat them as debt or equity. So here is where you choose. Now, if you're going to treat them as equity, then, so if you treat them as equity, if treated as equity, market value of the company will now be, remember we are using net asset basis, so it will just be 94 million because that is the total equity. Okay, net asset. And if you want it, you can say 143. Then you subtract total liabilities of 49. So which gives us 94 million. That is if you're treating the preference shares as equity. But if you treat them as debt, then market value of company is going to be, so you still have total assets, 143, then minus total liabilities. Now you are going to add the 49, and then you also remove the preference share capital of 25 million. So that is the difference. So if you treat them as debt, then market value will become 69. Okay. Now, the examiner goes on and says that this is what they expect you to do when you're getting market value on using net asset value. And the reason why they are saying that is that you are trying to look at your net assets if you were to sell this company. And preference shares are paid before you pay equity shareholders. So that means that what remains for the equity shareholders usually is the ordinary equity itself, not the preference shares. So what they are saying there is that treat them as debt. So when you are calculating market value of a company and you have preference shares, you treat them as debt. Now, yes, somebody wants to say something?
Nope.
Okay. So that is the first part of the question. It was asking us to calculate the market value using dividend growth model and net asset value. So then they want us to calculate the after-tax cost of debt of ANN Co. Now, how do you get that? They told us that we have 7% bonds which are redeemable in 6 years' time. So for the after-tax cost of debt, so we have, now these are redeemable. So if you say years, so year 0, okay, let's say, because remember they told us that remember we are trying to calculate the after-tax cost of debt. So in year 0, we need to get their market value, which is 103.5. So in year 0, we need the market value, which is 103.5. Then in year 1 to 6, we have interest payments. Now, interest is 7%, but we want after tax. So we are going to remove the tax aspect. So 7 multiplied by 1 minus the tax, which is 25%, which is 5.25. Then in the 6th year, we have redemption. And the redemption, they say it is at nominal value, so which is 100. Okay, so these are the cash flows. So we need to get their discount factors. Now, for us to determine the cost of capital, we need to discount at two rates and then calculate internal rate of return. So discount factor. So we need to determine what we start with. So let us start maybe with the 5%. So as I told you, you don't have to worry about what you start with in this case, because ideally you are going to get two rates and then get internal rate of return. So this is now, here's the result is 1, you don't have to compute. Now year 1 to 6 is an annuity, which you can calculate, or you go to the formula sheet and get it. So 1 plus 5% power minus 6 divided by 5%. Then the rest, this one is just 1 plus 5% power minus 6. So these are the discount rates. So now you can get the present value, 5%, which is basically cash flow divided by discount factor. So when you add the 3 to get the net present value, you realize that it's negative, which means that the actual rate is actually less than 5%. So now you could do maybe 2% or even 4%. Okay, let's do 4%. I was trying to do 2% to get small gap between the two, because you may find if I do 4%, I may still be negatives, which it may not be, but it doesn't matter, you could still use it. So if I do at 4%, so I'm just going to copy all this. So change this one to 4%, and this one to 4%, and this one. Then I can then multiply the cash flow by the discount factor at 4%. So when I do 4%, I get a positive. So now for me to get the internal rate of return, I normally get the lower discount rate, 4%. Then I add NPV at lower discount rate divided by NPV at lower discount rate minus NPV at higher discount rate, multiplied by the discount between the higher and the lower discount rate. 5% minus 4%. So which gives me 4.58. So this is the after-tax cost of capital. .58%. I hope that this is no longer something that disturbs you to calculate. Does it disturb you? No?
No.
Okay. So moving on, they want us to also calculate the weighted average after-tax cost of capital for NN. So for you to get weighted average after-tax cost of capital, and this one is actually cost of debt, not cost of capital, sorry, because we have been calculating debt. So for us to determine the weighted average, we need to know market value of equity, market value of debt. Then we need to know KE, need to know KD, 1 minus T. So we already know KD1 minus T, 4.58. KE is 12%. Now, market value of equity and debt. So market value of debt, if you remember that it is what the current interest market price of the bond is 103. And how many bonds do we have? So we have 20 million. Then we divide this by 100 and multiply it by 103.5. That's market value of debt. Market value of equity is the share price, which is given as 8.3 multiplied by how many shares we have. So how many shares did we have? 100 million shares. So which gives us 830 million. So now that we have this, I don't know if the formula is still clear to you, or should I bring it here? Okay, let me just bring it here. So this is the formula for work. So it's given as value of equity multiplied by KE divided by value of equity plus value of debt plus value of debt multiplied by KDY minus T divided by value of equity plus value of debt. So value of equity multiplied by KE plus value of debt multiplied by KD1 minus T divided by value of equity plus value of debt. So which gives us 12% as the weighted average cost of capital. So if you move on, the last part of the question says, explain the concept of market efficiency and distinguish between strong form efficiency and semi-strong form efficiency. So now, market efficiency, okay, if you remember, we said that market efficiency means how fast does information incorporate into the share price. So, or it looks at how the share price is going to reflect the information that is available. So, that's how you can summarize market efficiency. And actually, they are telling us to distinguish between strong and semi-strong. So, but you could do all three of them because there is strong form. You can start with the weak form. Then you have the semi-strong. Then you have the strong form. So now, when it comes to the weak form efficiency, the price reflects the historical information. So if you go to the market and find out how much a share is, the only information that is incorporated into that price will be historical information, which is the financials and the past performance of the company. So that is weak form. So it means that it's not going to be easy for you to predict the future because you're only looking at the past. Then the semi-strong efficiency, here, the market price reflects all publicly available information. The key is on the word publicly available information. Okay? So if information has been shared by the company, or if you can find it somewhere on some website, anything that is publicly available is going to be reflected in the semi-strong form efficiency. And finally, the strong form efficiency here, the market price reflects all information, okay, both public and privately held information, okay, which we sometimes call insider information. So now, if I ask you the distinction between semi-strong and strong form is that with the semi-strong, you are still able to predict, or if you are able to get insider information that no one else has, then you can beat the market somehow. But with the strong form efficiency, you can't beat the market because anything that you know is already in the market price. So even if I call you and I told you, okay, you guys, a CEO is actually about to resign, it means this and this, that price is already reflecting the fact that the CEO is about to resign. Now you can see why that is not going to be easy for it to happen. So at best, if the market can only be semi-strong, but it can never be strong form. So at best, and when you say at best, it means that in most cases it is actually weak form efficient. But at best it can be strong form, I mean semi-strong, but it can never be completely strong form efficient. So that is what those three terms mean. I don't know if that is clear. Is it clear?
Okay, yes, it is.
Okay. So now we should go to another question. So we have finished NN core. So let us also look at neighboring countries. So looking at neighboring countries, so this one comes from the so-called practice questions, whereby it just helps us to understand how we could expect some part B's of questions to look like, but it's not a standard question. So if you look at this question, what are they saying? They are saying that two neighboring countries have chosen to organize their electricity supply industries in different ways. In country A, electricity supplies are provided by nationalized industry. So in country A, we are using a nationalized industry. In country B, we are using private sector companies. So this is something that we can see happening actually. Now they're saying, explain how the objectives of the nationalized industry in country A might differ from those of private sector companies country B. Now, if you were following with the question that we did last in the previous, I think on Wednesday, we touched something to do with the objectives. This question is something that can be asked several times. They could decide to put it in every sitting really, whereby you have a question and then you have some part that tries to discuss the objectives of a private company versus a listed company versus a public company, even versus a charity, an NGO. So those companies will have different objectives. And here they are saying how they differ. Now, they're saying if we are discussing that, you're supposed to discuss whether investment planning and appraisal techniques are likely to also differ. So we are going to look at the objectives, then also whether investment planning and appraisal techniques are likely to differ in those two entities. Then for part B, they are saying that while the financial plans of a business are based on single objectives, can face a number of constraints that can put the pressure on the company to address more than one objective simultaneously. So when you read through here, they say that when you are planning, we base on one objectives, but things can happen that pressure us to actually address more than one simultaneously. And they're saying, what type of constraints can we face when assessing long-term plans? And they want you to actually refer to the stakeholders. How do you respond to their needs? And then managing organizations which have multiple objectives. So they have specified what you should deal with. So you can see that there's no time, they can't set this question as a full question for like 20 marks, but it kind of gives you the aspects that can be coming in the different other sections. So now let us start by looking at the objectives that the companies would have. Now remember that this one will be written in a word format. However, okay, let me just do it on Word. Okay. So what we are looking at here in this case is the objectives. For a private company and a nationalized company. Okay. So when you consider a company which is, of course, now remember, when you're answering, we should not just write it like that and not reference that we have the companies, that we have company B, which is private, and company A, or actually country A, which has a nationalized company. So now, the objectives, first of all, when a company is private, they'll be set by, for private companies, objectives will be set by the shareholders, okay? Shareholders and the board of directors. And the main objective usually is shareholder maximization. That's the main objective for companies that are private, because they have shareholders that they like to satisfy. Now, for nationalized companies, the objectives will likely be set by the government. And the main objective will be provision of the services for which the company is mandated. So for example, if it's Umeme is not basically a nationalized company, but it comes close because of the arrangements that the government has with Umeme. But you can think of a company that is fully government owned. So now, for a company which is fully government owned, the objectives will be for provision of services. So, and here in this case, so specifically in this case, provision of electricity, the economy, to the population, to the public, okay, at low rates. So that's basically what you would be talking about here in this case. Now, that is the objective setting. Now, for nationalized companies, the financial objectives will be there, but will be limited. Okay, you can say they will be limited, or they will come second after the objective, or after the mandate. You can even say after the mandate to provide the electricity. So now we need to determine, remember the question, we need to make sure we are answering all parts of the question. So we have discussed the objective setting, but now let's look at investment planning and appraisal techniques, if they are going to be similar or different. Now, investment planning looks at, should we maybe buy new assets? Okay. So for the private company in country B, investment planning will be made based on projects and activities that increase shareholder value, and thus will use techniques like net present value, okay, to invest, okay, or to make decisions, to make the decisions. That's what will happen for private companies in country B. But what about for the public nationalized company? For the public or for the nationalized company, investment planning will be made based on, so you can see when it comes to the government entities, what normally happens is that the government may have given them some kind of orders of what has to be done. Okay, so will be based on government apportionment, the budget, and of the budget, and what is something I'm trying to say, and the need, okay, for the service expand to other regions. For example, in this case, electricity. So when they want to expand electricity to other regions of the country, then they would, of course, definitely say now approve some other spending to actually be incurred. So that's what is going to mostly determine the kind of spending. Now, remember we talked about investment. Now let's talk about appraisal. Now, for the appraisal, so appraisals usually happen after the investment, right? So for the appraisals, private companies will basically try to look out, or they basically look at the profitability of the project, specifically maybe return the shareholders. Okay. While the nationalized entity will be focused on value for money. Okay, i.e., was this electricity distributed to the target communities at a low cost? Okay, so of course, value for money has aspects of economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. So I think that alone should cover the 10 marks that have been apportioned for this part of the question. Now, moving on. So they are saying, while the financial planning of a business. So here we are going to discuss this part, and we are looking at two aspects. How do companies deal with the more than one objective? And also, how do you respond to different stakeholders? So that is specifically. Now, so let us okay. So now, how do you deal with different stakeholders? So now let's see if the question is asking us specifically for one company. They are not restricting it for one company. So we can talk about both. Now, so we can say that for companies that are privately listed, or private companies that are private, the main stakeholder will be the shareholder. Okay. However, care must be taken to satisfy the other stakeholders. Now, however, let me not use the word however again. This is not very possible sometimes, since there can be conflicting needs, the different stakeholders. Okay, so now remember, we are supposed to answer this question looking at the various stakeholder groups and how we respond to them, and the difficulties associated with managing organizations with multiple objectives. So let us focus first on the stakeholders. Now, so if the needs of the stakeholders are conflicting, how does that affect us, and how do we deal with it? So for example, shareholders may want to maximize returns by increasing revenue and cutting costs. Okay, which costs include salaries for which employees need them increase. So you can see that that's sort of like a conundrum because, of course, the employees want to have higher salaries. And here we are saying, in order for us to satisfy the shareholders, we should reduce the salaries. So there is going to be some sort of pulling a rope, so to speak. So normally, what happens is that the company needs to strike a balance between the different stakeholders. And their needs. Okay, so how do they do it? By classifying them into groups based on their power and influence. Now there is a tool that they use where they plot those ones which have high power and high influence, those ones who have low power. Actually, it's basically power and also interest, not influence, because power and influence are the same thing, but interest. So there are people who could be so powerful, but they don't really care what you're doing. They won't be on your head. Then there are those people who are not even powerful, but they are always going to be making noise. You are doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, please change that. So those ones also have to be catered for. Now, ideally, you should realize that those ones who have power and also interest, you should keep them informed of everything that happens. Keep them satisfied, they have to be happy. There are those ones who don't have so much power, but they have so much interest. Those ones you put somebody there to keep telling them stories. Then there are those who don't have power, don't even have so much interest. Leave them alone, let them be. So that's basically how you deal with multiple stakeholder groups. So, of course, we are going to go to the solution and see how many other points have been made. But here you could also maybe look at, remember, the question has also what type of constraints might a company face. So we haven't looked at that. So the constraints when it comes to the stakeholders could be that, for example, you don't have enough resources to be able to, for example, increase the salaries of employees and at the same time lower the costs for the shareholders. That could be one of the constraints. We shall see other constraints when we go to the solution. But let us now specifically look at the other part of what are the challenges of having organizations that have multiple objectives. Now, so challenges of having multiple objectives. Now, the first challenge that you find is that sometimes those objectives can be conflicting. Now, if they are conflicting, the question becomes, what do you choose? Which one do you deem to be more important than the other, and therefore subjugate the other in the favor of the other one? So you may find it difficult to decide, right? Now, another reason is that the resources may not be enough handle all the objectives. Now, the question is, how do we apportion them? So here they're asking, which objectives do you deem superior the others? Okay, so which objectives do you take to be more important than the others? That's a question. And of course, it is your duty as a finance manager in this case to determine which objectives you're going to give more weight than others. What else can we put on that? So the management of such companies becomes extremely difficult. Imagine you are a finance manager and your company not only sells shoes, but also solar lamps, but also like a lot of assorted merchandise. So all of them will have different cash flows that you have to plan for, the loans that they need. Some of them have smaller returns, therefore you can't use the same cost of capital for all of them. So basically you need to sort of be like as if you're managing 7 companies, which means that each of those small objectives can become a company of its own. And that's why sometimes companies decide to actually break off some of them and they spin them off into their own individual companies. So this is the challenge that you can get. So I think for now, let us go to the solution, quickly peruse through it, and then see which other points we can make from here. So they are saying here that you have to carefully read, and so that you identify what you're going to have to answer. Okay, so that you answer the requirement in full and not just end up discussing areas that won't earn marks. So again, they are telling you what is highlighted is what is most important. So the first question was to deal with the different objectives and how they are set. So you say that the objectives of the industry, which is nationalized, is going to be set by government other than by the financial matters. So it's going to be provision of services to the public, provision of electricity for the economic development of the country. So, which means going to cut to considerable cost to outlying areas, or the areas where the government wishes to develop. So they can have to take those services there, even if it doesn't make economic sense. Now, the financial objectives, of course, will be there, but they'll be secondary. And usually what happens is that they'll have maybe attempting to achieve a target rate of return, although the government may be prepared to accept a negative return if it's able to achieve its political objectives. So that is for the nationalized entity. On the other hand, the private sector company will probably be maximization of shareholder wealth, like we saw. So now, but because they're saying that since the industry is important, like electricity generation, government will still meddle in their business. And this one can be seen with Umeme. Umeme is not a government entity, but there are some controls that government puts on it because they are providing a service that is important for the economy, for the population. Now, when it comes to the investment of a nationalized entity will be determined by government, which is responsible for the supply of funds through the budgeting process. Whereas in the private sector, they will have market forces that influence investments, where management attempts to maximize shareholder wealth, or at least satisfy their shareholders while meeting other objectives. Then for appraisal, they measure the objectives are being met, and of course they look at discounted cash flow and
We've lost you. I've lost you.
So we made most of those points. I just wanted you to
You're breaking. I don't know if it's only on my side.
Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I think my router just restarted for some reason. So we're saying that most of the points that we have been that are here, we made them. I just wanted us to look at them and see how they are worded differently. So now part B, just give me a second. Are you hearing noise coming from the background?
No, it's all clear for me.
Okay. Okay. So now when it comes to part B, to respond to the various stakeholder groups. So here, we remember this special part had two parts. One of the stakeholders, and the other one was about the different the management objectives that we can have. So now, how do we handle the different stakeholders? Of course, they are saying here that if you are looking at only maximizing profitability, then it's mainly easy because you are the only stakeholders you are going to be worried about are the shareholders. However, you can't do it without looking at other people. Okay, for example, employees, suppliers, customers, public at large. So you have many groups that emerge, and here they have given you the employees. So those ones, they want you to increase their employee welfare. So then we have community at large, which wants you to respond to the community concerns. And now the constraints are being put here for each group. For the employees, the constraint is that maximum hours worked. For instance, you can't make your employees work for 9 hours a day. Most times they're supposed to work for, I think, 8.5 in Uganda, or 8. So, but you find that most people actually are working for 12 hours a day, if you're being honest with yourself. And auditors don't even count the hours they work. So, but you can see that that's a constraint. Then the community, of course, you can't do everything. So there will be a limit of the activities that you can do to satisfy them. Then customers, for them, they of course want sure that you are producing what they need at the quality that they need it, but at a cheap price. So here you need to make sure that you are able to abide by the minimum quality standards. So amongst other things that have been told here, you have been given for suppliers, you have been given for government and trade bodies. So you can see that they have not made new points from what we made. The only thing that they have added here is just this matrix of the different constraints and objectives of the different stakeholder groups that are identified. So when it comes to second part of it, looking at the different management objectives, so then if the objectives were congruent, then that would be okay. Now, in this case, congruent means that if they are aligned, such that they are all parts of one big game or one big goal. For example, if the objectives would be, first of all, to sell the product to as wide the market as possible. Second one may be to reach out to the different parts of the country. See that those ones are kind of congruent. Reach out to the different parts of the country and sell them more products. But usually objectives are going to be many, and they are going to come from different stakeholders. And that means that there will be some conflicts and then also compromises that have to be made, because as we said up, different stakeholders like different things. So others, for example, if you are dealing with other stakeholders instead of the shareholders, you will got some costs. For example, the time that you spend on them, then also some of the objectives are not very clear, so you may have some problems to satisfy them. Then other objectives will be conflicting and you can't even compromise. So that means that you have to prioritize and then rank them so that you can choose which ones to handle. So we made such points. Then also you can have new groups of stakeholders coming in, which means that you may have to plan for them long term, which is a difficult thing. For example, environmental issues that were not so important 30 years ago are now very important. We have to consider them. Also, management becomes complex when you have multiple objectives that have to be satisfied. So you are going to face many constraints for the different manager that is available to handle those. So those are the points that have been made. You can see that, of course, they have been worded differently, but you can't say that the points are different from the ones that you made. So I don't know if you have any questions. If you don't, we can take a short 5 minutes break. Then we come back and try to do another question, see if we shall be able to finish it.
Okay.
All right, so let us try to attempt this question. KSP core. So first of all, we look at what the question is asking us to do. And they are saying calculate the net benefit or cost of the proposed changes in trade receivables policy and comment on your findings. And then they are saying, as a second part, calculate whether the bulk purchase discount offered by the supplier is financially acceptable, and comment on the acceptable on assumptions that have been made. So then they're saying also for part C, which can discuss the similarities and differences between working capital policies in the following areas. So we have working capital investment and working capital financing. So most of these we already have handled them. So let us start. So let us see the question. They're saying that KXP is an e-business that trades solely over internet. In the last year, the company had sales of 15 million. All the sales were on 30 days credit to the commercial customers. And the financials show that receivables were for 2,446. That is 2.46 million, payables 2.2 million, and there was an overdraft of 3 million. Now, in order to ensure to encourage customers to pay over on time, KSP proposed to introduce an early settlement discount of 1%. So a discount of 1% for payment within 30 days, while increasing the normal credit period to 45 days. So now the expectation is that on average, 50% of customers will take the discount and pay within 30 days. 30% of customers will pay after 45 days, and 20% will actually not change their current paying behavior. So what is their current behavior? Current behavior was 30 days. So anyway, let's first see if the current behavior was 30 days, because 30 days is what they give them. But what do they actually take? We need to determine that. So if you continue, right now we order 15,000 units per month of product Z, demand for which is constant. There is one supplier of product Z, and the cost of product Z purchases over the last year was 540,000. That's the cost for the purchase. The supplier has offered 2% discount for orders of product Z of 30,000 units or more. Each order costs $150 to place, and the holding cost is 24 cents per unit per year. Overdraft 6% per year. So now let us first of all look at the net benefit, the changes. So now what you normally have to determine in this case is what is the positioning now. Okay, so KSP so current position. Now the current position is receivables 2466. Now remember that sales are for 15 million. Now, so receivables are 2466. $2,466,000. So which means that what's the average receivables days? Now let us actually calculate receivables months, because we have been given, oh no, we can do days. Let's do days, receivables days. So receivables days is receivables divided by the credit sales multiplied by 365. So on average, people are taking actually now 60 days to actually pay. Now, the proposal is to change the receivables days to what? They want to change the policy. So they give a discount, 30 days. Then the other guys who take 45. And then we already know that 50% will take 30 days, 30% will take 45, and 20% will not change. That means that the new proposal or the new position is going to be, so what is the average receivable days? Let's start with the days. So now 30% will pay after 45 days. Let's see. 50%, 30 days. Then 30%, 45 days. And then finally, 20% current position, which is the 60, which means that on average, the days will become 40.5. So now, when you are calculating this, you are going to have to determine, first of all, the benefits of the discount, okay? So the benefits of the discount is going to be now, because you see now you've been giving these people so we have not got the average receivables. What will they become? They will become 40.5 divided by 365 multiplied by the 15 million sales. So receivables will have to decrease from 2.4 to 1.6. So the benefit, one of them will be savings. Okay? And the savings is overdraft savings from reduced receivables. And what would that be? So you've been paying, so to reduce by that much, and then you pay interest on your overdraft. So 6%. That's how much you save. Okay? You save 48,000. That's the benefit. Now, so what else are we supposed to look at? Now we need to look at what is because remember, since you are giving them a discount, you're saving on the overdraft, but the costs. So the costs are also going to be one. It's going to be the lost revenue, because you are supposed to have received the entire amount, but you're giving people a discount. So now, how much is the discount costing you? Remember that the sales are 15 million, but people who are going to take on the discount are going to be 50%. So 50% of that. And how much are you losing? Because you're giving them a discount of 1%. So you're losing 1% of that. So you're losing 75,000, right? So now you can decide to make the cost negative, benefit positive, so that when you add them, you are able to see that actually there is a net cost. So because there is a net cost, the decision is do not offer the discount. That's very clear. Do you understand the logic?
Yes.
Okay. So that is the first part. Now, second part says, determine whether the bulk discount offered by the supplier is financially acceptable and comment on the assumptions made in your calculation. So when it comes to that, you need to, first of all, set up your order quantity, number of orders, then you can determine the ordering costs. Then you have average inventory, then inventory holding costs. Then from the inventory holding costs, then you have purchase cost. Then you have total cost. These are the items we are going to be looking at. Now, they have told us that at the moment, we order 15,000 units per month. So, which means that the demand is how much? So let me first set up here. So that we put some factors here. So the demand is 15,000 units times 12. Okay, it's 180,000 units. Then purchases 540,000. So the cost 540,000. So this is the purchase cost. Then they are giving us a discount, 2%. When you order 30,000, ordering cost 150. Then holding cost 24 cents. 24 cents per unit per year. Okay, so right now we are ordering 150. So what's the first thing that we need to do actually is determine what is the EOQ. Okay. So EOQ, the formula is given to us in the formula sheet as square root of 2 times CO times the demand divided by the holding cost. So we can first get EOQ. So EOQ is going to be square root of 2 times the cost of ordering, which is given as 150, times the annual demand, which is 180,000, divided by the cost of holding, $0.24, which gives us 15,000. So I did that because we don't want to assume that what we are currently ordering is the EOQ. In this case, it happens to be the same thing. So we are going to come here and say if we are ordering at 150, if we are ordering 15,000 units, how many orders do we make? We make 12 orders. The ordering cost is going to be the 12 orders multiplied by the cost of ordering per one, which is 1,800. Now, average inventory is given by this divided by 2. We saw why that's the case, because you start from 0, then you order 15,000 units, then you drag until when you go back to 0, and then you order again. Now, it means that inventory holding cost is 24 cents multiplied by the average inventory. Now, the purchase cost is 540,000. Total cost is going to be ordering cost plus inventory holding plus the purchase cost, which gives us 543,600. Now, so now when we come to the discount, they are saying the discount is given to us when we order 30,000 units or more. So 30,000 units. So of course now those are going to be now 18 orders. Then ordering cost 18 multiplied by the cost per of ordering for each order. Then average inventory is still going to be divided by 2, so 15,000. And if the inventory holding cost is 24 cents times 15,000. Now they are giving us a 2% discount, which means that we are going to pay 540 multiplied by 1 minus 2%. So we shall be paying 529,000. And when you add years that we are paying 535,500. Therefore, we should take the bulk discount. So we are taking the bulk discount because it's giving us the lowest cost of the two options. Now, they have told us to comment on they told us to comment on the assumptions made in your calculation. So what has been assumed? So let's see what is being assumed. First of all, we are assuming that the demand is constant, which they have told us, but also the cost of ordering is constant and the cost of holding is constant. So some of those things are not going to be true, they will change. So those are the assumptions that have been made of the variables being constant. So then finally, we answer this part. So here we are asked to discuss similarities and differences between working capital policies, and we have investment and we have financing. So 8 marks. So we are going to discuss working capital financing, working capital investment. Now remember, we are looking at similarities and differences. So basically, how I would go about it would be to first of all, you don't have to, sometimes people use a table, or you can just write. So what is working capital financing? So this concerns whether finance working capital using short-term debt or long-term debt. That's what financing is about in this case, working capital. Now, remember now for all of them, we have somebody who is conservative, somebody who is aggressive. Okay? So actually one of the similarities is that both use the terms conservative, moderate, and aggressive, but they are different in either case. Okay, so this is a similarity. Then differences can be put within here, right? So now, so now, when it comes to financing, so what happens that most people would want finance working capital using short-term debt. However, there are some proportions of the working capital that do not change. We can say fixed. Okay? And those that fluctuate maybe on a daily or weekly basis, right? So the idea is it will finance the fixed portion of of working capital using long-term debt, and then the fluctuating portion using short-term debt. Now, The reason is that although short-term debt tends to be to be cheap, but not always, it can be called out demand. Okay. Yet long-term debt remains stable. So now that is working capital financing. Now, working capital investment deals with the proportion of investment in working capital. Now, the thing is, compared to total assets. Now, the thing is, when you have some money to spare, the question would be, do you invest it in a new machine, that's the long-term assets, or do you invest it in working capital? Okay, so compared to total assets. Okay, so some companies invest more in non-current assets as opposed to working capital. But working capital investment is important because it allows the company to sell on credit, which might be important, especially since other competitors offer credit terms. So now the similarities are that both they use the term aggressive, conservative, and moderate. And the differences is that for working capital investment, aggressive means a very low level of investment in working capital. Okay. Of course, moderate means a suitably moderate level of investment, and conservative means a high level of investment in working capital. Now, for working capital financing, a conservative approach means using long-term debt finance all the working capital. So you can say the fixed part and the floating and the fluctuating one, or the variable part. Then you can say the moderate financing involves using long term for the fixed part, and short term for the fluctuating one. While an aggressive one means financing most of the working capital using short-term debt. Okay, so this one is guaranteed to give you 8 marks because you have talked about both of them. You have talked about the similarities and talked about the differences. Now, I don't know if you knew this or it is something that you feel like you couldn't have written like this. But because you already looked at this, so if you are not able to write it like this, at least what you should do is after here, go to this question and look at how they wrote. So you find that if you go there, you find that they have written a little bit different from mine, but the points that we have made are all there. So, and then you do what I told you. When you find section B numbers, or section C numbers rather, that have period parts that you don't know, you summarize them in your notes that you will use for brushing up before you go to the exam. So do we have any questions, or have we understood?
No questions.
All right, so if you have no questions, thank you for attending. Have a good night. See you next Tuesday.
Okay, thank you too. Have a good night.
Yeah,
Good
bye.
night.
Good
Bye.
night.